Felix Mendelssohn and his Violin Concerto Number 2 in E minor. This violin concerto is an absolute staple for all violinists around the world, of all ages as well. I'm so excited to hear Alexi Kenny perform this with the New Haven Symphony Orchestra on November 19th. I think it's going to be an extraordinary performance. The concerto is one of the first where the composer and soloist worked together, not side by side, but Mendelssohn wrote this for a friend of his that also happened to be the concertmaster for one of his orchestras. So there was a working relationship where Mendelssohn could say, does this look playable? How does this lay? And his friend could give him suggestions, not really advice, because Mendelssohn is going to write what he wants, but suggestions on, this might be a little bit easier for me. It's easily at the time, one of the most revolutionary concertos for more than one reason. The first reason, surprisingly, happens in about 2 seconds. The orchestra plays 3 beats of music and then the solo violin enters. It was only really Beethoven, and particularly his piano concertos, the 5th and the 4th, where the soloist enters as early. The Emperor Concerto, of course, having a big E-flat major chord before the pianist runs right into a cadenza. The Mendelssohn presents the theme with the violin soloist first, which was not the tradition in the classical period. Normally you'd have the orchestra play the theme, and then they'd do a cadence, and then the soloist would come in and play the exact same music they've just played, just on the solo instrument. So right away, I can only imagine what the audiences thought when they heard this undulating figure, and expected something other than the soloist to start playing. The other big difference between this and previous concertos is that Mendelssohn composed it with no breaks. That is, he did not intend for one movement to end and there be silence, for applause to sneak in, which was what would happen and still happens, which is fine. We applaud when we like things, as we should. And so the work in 3 movements is what we call throughcomposed. And as the first movement ends, there's a lone bassoon that holds on, connecting the 2 movements. The first movement has this beautiful, like I mentioned, undulating figure that the violin soars over, and is actually quite ferocious and very energetic and very technical in the soloist part. The second movement has no less technical work in it, but makes a much more lyrical, passionate plea in it than the first movement. And the main second theme has some of the most tricky violin parts, where he essentially writes 2 voices in the solo violin part. Something that we'll see echoed in future romantic concertos like Brahms, like Sibelius. Really fantastic. The beginning of the third movement, again, as we just throughcomposed, has sort of an introduction that's likened, in my opinion, to someone setting up a grand joke, but disguising it as a grand story. Is all this plodding around, yada-dee, yada-dee, yada-da, yada-da-dee, yada-dee, yada-dee, dee-da-dee, and then finally we get to the third movement proper, yam, bum, bagadum, bagadagadum. And I think that it's Mendelssohn's true character shining through. Energetic, lighthearted, all the way through the end, never letting the soloist let up at all, playing lots of notes with lots of vibrancy, but really ending with a great energetic bang.